Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast. My name is Ben Jackson and once again I'll be your host. And as per the last couple of weeks, it's just me and Scott again. Scott, how are you doing this evening?
I'm really good, Ben. How are you?
Yeah, I am all good, thank you. Coming down with a bit of an illness, but everyone is at the moment. For regular listeners, Joris is still around and he will be back at some point, so he hasn't left us. Unless he has signed a transfer deadline day deal, because we are recording on transfer deadline day. So maybe he has, maybe he signed with a new podcast. Who knows? But fingers crossed we've managed to secure him for the foreseeable future. So yeah, as it is transfer deadline day, maybe things will happen while we're recording. So apologies if something big does happen and we've missed it, because we're not going to wait until midnight or whenever the kind of final thing is to kind of make our recording. So let's quickly go through the results that happened this week. Then Friday night we had Standard against Eupen. That one finished 3-1 to Standard. Westerlo beat 10 men Mechelen. That one finished 2-0 to the hosts. Leuven and St. Truden played out a 1-1 draw. Kortrijk and Oostende played out a crazy 2-2 draw. Charleroi then lost to Union 1-0. Anderlecht and Antwerp played out a really decent 0-0 draw. Cercle Brugge and Ghent had an absolute crazy game. That one finished 3-2 to Cercle. Zulte Waregem narrowly lost to Club Brugge 2-1. And then Genk steamrolled Serang 4-0. So let's start in Liège then, where it was Standard against Eupen. Eupen obviously hadn't had their game against Genk, so they're kind of playing catch-up now. And other results have kind of meant they're under a little bit more pressure. But they did get off to a really good start. Reagan Charles Cook with a kind of instinctive finish after Bodart made a really good save. I think it's from Isaac Christie-Davis, actually. Christie-Davis cutting in from the right-hand side. Bodart with a pretty decent save, but Charles Cook was just kind of there to tap that one in. That kind of woke Standard back up and they started to play. A bit of a scramble in the box, ball kind of bobbling everywhere. It looked like it could have been a penalty given, but referee didn't have to make a decision in the end because William Balikwisha just kind of stepped up and smashed the ball home and it was bobbling around. Really nice finish from him. 4 minutes later, the turnaround was complete from the Liège side. Philip Zinkernagel with another fantastic goal to add to his collection this season. He curled it into the bottom corner and it looked like that was that. And they had a couple more chances. Stipe Prelika missed a couple of sitters, but then he did get his goal. He rounded Moser in the net. And I think, I've not checked this, but it felt like it was his first goal outside of the 6-yard box, but it's literally centimetres outside of the 6-yard box. And that is basically how this one finished. It's another defeat for Eupen. And I don't know about you, Scott, but this week, obviously, we saw Will over with Rams coming back and having that dramatic late equaliser against PSG away. And he's like celebrating. I'm like, meanwhile, his brother's out in East Belgium fighting to kind of keep this side up in the league. And the contrast in what's happened with these two. In the sense of Will's, obviously, Beer Scott said no. They went through 3 coaches, got relegated. He's now made his way into management. Well, Ed kind of went straight into the Charleroi job that same year, I think it was. Beer Scott didn't want Will. And he kind of thought they've now kind of flipped in the sense of Will's now the big name and Ed's kind of like struggling to deal with this situation. Like, I wonder if they're chatting on the phone and stuff like that. But yeah, did kind of feel for Ed watching that compared to what happened to his side this weekend, because I think at the end of the day, Standard were good value for the win. I think they were the better team, and it felt like, even though the stats don't really show it that much, I felt like, especially in the second half, they really took control of the game.
Yeah, I think that's arguably Standard's best performance of the season. Actually, I thought they were pretty good, and they were doing that one thing that Ronnie Dyler has been trying to kind of find a rich vein of all season, despite the general lack in the quality that we've talked a lot about for what feels like ages. They were really incisive this weekend, I think, and made the best of their opportunities in the final third. And it's that they have to kind of keep doing for the moment, until they can inject that quality to the squad that they're hoping to do, which is going to take quite some time. But Ronnie Dyler will be absolutely delighted with that, using every opportunity in the final third and taking advantage of that. to win games in that fashion. It's funny, actually, just to circle back on the Ed and Will Still chat there. It's really amusing. I mean, I'm all in favour of everybody celebrating goals against PSG in the way that Will Still celebrated that sort of last minute equaliser. That was brilliant, and it's incredible to think, actually, for a coach who did so well when he was in Belgium himself. Obviously left Belgium to pursue other opportunities. It's a bit of a shame that some other clubs in Belgium didn't seize the opportunity to bring Will in, actually, because I think that's a missed opportunity. It's kind of interesting, actually, his story as well, because he still doesn't have all of his UEFA Pro badges. So at the moment, Rams are actually having to pay a fee in order to allow him to effectively be on the touchline at games, which is just bizarre. I mean, they've spent something like, I think, €300,000. That's for a different podcast. That's the French football podcast. But it's interesting all the same. I don't doubt at all he's in very close contact with Ed and his their younger brother. Who's on Ed's coaching staff at Eupen as the video analyst, and Eupen struggling a little bit to kind of pick anything up at the moment. I still think they're going to be okay. I think there's enough there, but they're certainly in that skirmish down at the bottom, and will probably be in it right until the end. But my instincts tell me they're going to be all right. Great weekend for Standard. Another quite good tifo from the Standard Ultras. Always good value for that. And they're doing rather well, Standard, actually. I mean, nobody's highlighting actually how well they're doing. I was saying a few weeks ago that I thought, Ronnie Dyler was right to come out and say we're doing okay, we're probably ahead of schedule. I think they absolutely are. I mean, they're in and about pushing for a playoff one spot, which I think will ultimately elude them. I think that lack of quality in the squad will see them come a wee bit short for that. But, to consider where they are at the moment, when you look at the relative lack of depth in the squad, proves to me that there's some really good coaching work going on there around, building a team dynamic and just getting that mentality right to keep making sure that they pick up points. But on the transfer front, they've been quite ruthless with their negotiations as well. They've been really holding out for decent fees for players who probably don't have a decent fee in them, and it looks as if they've got that. Salim Amala looks like he's now on the way to Valladolid. That looks like it's going to go through before the window closes. Round about $2 million plus a sell-on for them. And Nicholas Raskin to Rangers looks like it's more or less done. I would expect that to be confirmed tonight or first thing tomorrow for about 1.8 million plus a 20% sell-on. And I think that both those deals are sensationally good when you consider both those players in the last 6 months of their contract. So Fergal Harkin and his team at Standard have been negotiating really, really well there. Take my hat off to them.
Yeah, I think I've just seen a picture of Raskan in the Rangers shirt, so that one is definitely done. And then, yeah, Amala, it was weird because there was then this random kind of, he might go to Hertha Berlin because of the 777, his investment there, because Valladolid couldn't get some sort of license or something to sign him. It was all a bit weird, but yeah, that one definitely is happening. You're definitely more confident about Eupen than me. I have them, I'm looking at the table and I'm like, out of the three, if you go from Zulte Waregem up to Mechelen, let's say Kortrijk are fine, they're not, but if you take them out of the equation, if you say Cercle and Oostende, they look pretty cooked at the moment, and Zulte, Eupen and Kortrijk, I just feel like Eupen are the side that I worry the most about out of those three teams, just because of the way Zulte Waregem played with Vormer coming in, and Kortrijk have just improved massively. We'll speak about Mechelen in a bit because I feel like today especially has not gone well for them by the look of it, and that could have a massive implication on their season going forward. With Eupen, it's kind of getting those players you're focusing on to start performing, and that's what Ed's just got to do, hasn't he?
Yeah, they need to start picking up some points somewhere and kind of quite quickly now. I think the most worrying thing from their point of view actually is the fact that Zulte Waregem, obviously their form has taken an upturn in recent weeks, and actually they're performing at a level in terms of their output that, as we were saying last week, on the whole is pretty encouraging for them. I mean, I've seen some of the coaching staff at Zulte this week have been saying in the press that they feel if they can just keep maintaining the level they've set over the last 2 or 3 weeks actually, they're quite confident that they can get out of this. And looking at them, I mean, I've seen a lot of them since the end of the World Cup, and there definitely has been an upturn there. So I would probably agree with that view. And Eupen just need some points to kind of keep any momentum going there, because they seem to have lost all momentum. And of the sides actually in the bottom 5, say, they're the one, I think you're right to say they're the one that probably worries you the most at the moment, because they're obviously sitting just above that drop zone, and they've got some interesting fixtures coming up over the next few weeks. They're at home to Genk, a home game against Westerlo, both games that it's difficult to see points for them. And then they've got a big game at home to Mechelen. So, they've got a run of home games there that it's kind of important that they try and get something from, because they've then got Antwerp away, and then Cercle come to visit. So looking at that, I don't see a great number of points there. But, I said that recently as well about Zulte, and they picked up points in what looked like really tough games for them. So, it's still there for them.
Yeah, what do we know? Things just seem to happen. Let's go to Mechelen, who are now, just 5 points off of that kind of bottom group. Obviously, they got that big win against Kortrijk recently, which is just, I feel like it's going to prove to be pretty important. They went to Westerlo, and it looks like I wasn't able to watch this game, but from what I saw of highlights and stuff and stats, and it looks like Westerlo really did dominate this. No Lyle Foster, no problem for them. Kian Vassen came in, he got a double. Nice finish in the first half to take advantage of some pretty poor defending, and then a goal from a set piece in the second half. Dimitri Lavalley was then sent off as well in the 77th minute, just to kind of compound things even more for Mechelen. I mean, poor old Stephen Defoe wasn't even there. So Van der Beest had to take the side instead. It is the scoring goals like that is just becoming an issue for them just constantly. Like, they've got Julian Ngoy back, and you want him to get on a run of form. They were looking at Seder Dursun, obviously the former Darmstadt striker who's gone to Fenerbahce. He decided he doesn't want to come. Today, I think they were looking at Sorry Kaba. He doesn't want to come. He got offers obviously from Anderlecht that were interested in him. Some Premier League clubs, I think, are interested in him. Like, he's just not going to go to Mechelen. So I felt those two, in a way, I felt they were always kind of long shots anyway. Like Dursun as well, like, if he's available, I just don't feel like a side like Mechelen are going to get him. Given his record in the German second tier, I feel like other German clubs would probably swoop in and take him and be able to get him in. So I'm sure they've got other people they're looking at, but it feels like Kaba and Dursun, I just never felt that they were ever going to be realistic targets. And now they're staring at the barrel of, 6 hours to go. They haven't really strengthened during this window, and they're a couple of injuries away from being... They are in the relegation battle, and I think Yannick Thielen was saying that after some of the games, being like, look, we are in this battle, and that bench is still so young and inexperienced, and I think the golfing kind of quality and class probably did show in this game, and Westerlo are kind of playing a little bit more like the team that they're doing what we expect a side like Mechelen to be able to do. So very concerning kind of for Mechelen fans going into this final day of the transfer window without having really done anything. Obviously, you've had the issues behind the scenes with kind of like the takeover and stuff like that and what's financially available, but they haven't even been able to like ship some of those players they wanted to get out to be able to then reinforce. So it feels like it's kind of status quo without... I don't think that's what Stephen Defoe really wanted. I think he wanted some movement to happen. He said he doesn't want some of these players, but like even Yves Sverres, they were trying to get rid of him. He was meant to be going to Molenbeek, but that's fallen through. It's not going to happen now. He's just going to sit in the second team. It's just like, it's a recipe for disaster, and they've just got to hope that the players that they have got will stay fit and kind of get them through to the end of this season in the league still.
Yeah, I think there's the potential for the kind of perfect storm of disasters there. You're right. I think the window has not been good for them, and I'm sure the phone will be ringing furiously up until the last minute this evening, because we know that within the last couple of hours of a transfer window, that's often when the movement that's being stonewalled between agents and clubs tends to be loosened. So there's a few hours yet for them to try and bring somebody in. I think the worrying thing about the combination, the perfect storm that I was talking about, obviously, they've been a bit unfortunate with injuries to kind of key players. Those key players, when they have played, haven't played to the level that we know that they can play at. And when they have been fit, they've not really been able to go on a run with the side either, So, players haven't been able to stay fit. They're not performing at the level you would hope. And the players that have come in the meantime aren't contributing enough. I think the last window, the summer window, which at the time I thought was quite encouraging. I thought I felt quite good about the business they did over the summer, but what's happened since then has not come to pass in a positive way for them at all. And there is a real danger that, with this mix going on, that you can get sucked in at the last minute. I mean, that's happened to Mechelen before, actually, in recent years. When they've been relegated before, nobody really thought that they had enough, but the wrong results happened at the wrong points and they got sucked in and down they went, and there is definitely the potential for that to happen again. I think if somebody doesn't come in before the window closes, I think they just have to hope that, those key players, the Kieran Marabtis, the Nicholas Storms, the Rob Scoofs, can raise their game and bring the game that we know that they've got, because they're going to need that actually to avoid a situation that, they don't want to be in. The 2 goals they conceded this weekend I thought were pretty awful, really, really cheap goals that you probably shouldn't concede at any level. Really, really poor, I thought, which didn't give them much of a chance. And when you're struggling to score goals, going behind early in games like that, you're just making it really, really difficult for yourself. Westerlo, on the other hand, it's Lyle who, I suppose, business as usual for them, and they've been playing really good football all season. Jonas de Rock has got them playing quite a good brand of attacking football. They're a good side to watch. They're pretty fearless as well. They've got a good mix going there, and I felt, with their home form being pretty strong as it has been all season, I thought they were strong favourites probably to win that, and they did that without Mechelen putting up much of a fight this weekend. I suppose it's worth bearing in mind as well that Mechelen have changed their sporting director as well, kind of quite recently, so that's probably had some kind of impact on this window as well. I think, knowing that they really need to improve the quality of that squad is difficult, because other clubs will know that as well. And it's a shame, because Mechelen are actually a very attractive club to kind of go for. I think the situation they're in at the moment, in terms of where they are on the table, kind of counts against them. I still have, if I'm honest, and this is just a very personal view, I still have a question mark over whether Steven Defour is the right man for the job longer term. It's obviously difficult following somebody like Wouter Rankin, who did so well there, but I just think the mix of inconsistency and all of that, I think, is not going to help Stephen, and that's not necessarily his fault, but I have this nagging feeling that, if a change is maybe made in the summer, and I don't think the club would want to do this, but I could understand why they would, that he might pay the price for a disappointing season. Truth is, they were always going to have a difficult season without Rankin. I think it just, the signings just haven't turned up.
I'm looking through some of those signings that they made, and it's just like, yeah, I think one of the problems is you've had with someone like Ngoy is that obviously he's been injured, and he was meant to come in and replace Kuipers, wasn't he? That was his kind of role. They brought in Malady, obviously, kind of I feel like that was just like let's try and get something out of this Kuipers deal as well. Let's just grab Malady as well. He's not quite come off either. Vestata just kind of made sense. I don't think he's been a bad signing. I think that was quite a decent pickup. Bates has actually been pretty good at the back, but then you've got like Alessio De Cruz, Bully Bolingi, Lavalley's been quite injured. G's Voters, they brought him back and they want to get rid of him. Jorge Hernandez barely played. Is he even still there? I don't even know if he's still there anymore. Like, that's the sort of thing. But then you look through the squad as well, and I know some of the players they want to get rid of. Samuel Umgue. They've wanted to get rid of him this window, and you think Cameroonian international,
yeah, good player,
gone to the World Cup. Yeah, he plays for the national team. He was good for them last season. Before I think it was Sousa kind of took his place, which is fair because Sousa was a quality player, and they just couldn't fit him, Scoofs and Umgue in. But it's like, if you're struggling for players, and you clearly can't get rid of him at the moment, just play him. And I don't really understand what the situation is there with that one. That one seems like a weird one. I'm like, he could come in and do a job for you at the moment when you need players at least, because your bench is a bit all over the place. And then Gustav Engvall,
Mm.
he's been there for a while now, and he's never really done it for
Mm.
them. He didn't even, I think he went to Sarpsborg on loan over the summer and scored like 1 goal. So it's kind of like you're stretching to find anyone off the bench that's going to
Yeah.
improve things. But I know what you mean about, I think you're right with Stephen Defoe, it's really difficult. It's kind of, it feels quite difficult to judge because of the circumstances, but the 11 should be doing better. I think obviously if they went down, I don't think he'd be there. I don't think they trust him to be the one to bring them back up, but I don't know if he'll get to that situation with him in charge still.
Yeah, I think he's had a tough start. I think for a number of reasons. I mean, I've been saying a few times I think the balance in the side just isn't right for various reasons. And to be fair to Stephen, what he's done is he's tried different alternatives. You know, different players and different wings. He's tried different people up front as well, just to see if that makes a difference. And very little of the tinkering has made much of a difference. You know, the inconsistency in general performances remain. So, you know. Yeah, it's just that, you know, I feel that, you know, the not the only hope for staying up, because I don't feel dire for their situation, but I think they are now relying on the real quality in the squad, you know, turning up and kind of getting some points for them now, just to kind of get the morale up for them more than anything else, because at the moment they feel like a bit of a light touch.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Let's move on to the battle of two sides who, one of them wants to get rid of all the players they signed in the summer, and the other one wants to bring back all the players that left them in the summer. That's Leuven against St. Truden. Leuven, I think Alexander Buska left during the week, so that's another summer signing gone from them. They've made a couple of signings though, which look quite interesting. We'll talk about those. But St. Truden, obviously Rocco Leitz came back. Taichi Hara is now back, which just kind of made sense. I guess they needed a little bit more depth up front. He was decent for them last season. They liked him. Why not bring him back? He was definitely available. But it was the other man, Daichi Hayashi, who they brought in over the summer, who was also there last year, who got the opening goal in the 9th minute. And another good goal from him. Leuven, again, Gonzalez on the bench, still clearly not completely fit to start these games. But it was someone else, Paul Steinson, who got them back into the game. Shriver's going down, I think a couple of papers said, a little bit easily, or did what he had to do to get the penalty, but Paul Steinson made no mistake from the spot. This week, I think today and yesterday, Leuven have made a couple of signings. Mai Traore comes in from Viking, just on loan, I think, to begin with. Interesting one. I think they've brought him in as a striker. He scored 4 goals in 23 games for Viking. Technically last season, because the way the Elite Serien works, it obviously is a summer league, so it's just a 2022 season. An interesting one. I don't know. I'm looking forward to seeing him play. 23-year-old Kong DRC player. They also brought in Emmanuel Toku, former Ghanaian youth international, been playing a lot in Botev Plovdiv in Bulgaria. He comes in kind of as an attacking midfielder. And then they've looked for the next Kamal Soa. Nathan Opoku has come in from Leicester on loan. Last man to do that on loan from Leicester. Kamal Soa obviously was really, really good for them. I don't know, like their summer transfers are weird. These ones are like just the unknown. And I'm obviously, with my interest in African football and seeing kind of young African footballers come into the Belgian Pro League, all 3 of these players are super, super interesting to me, and I'm looking forward to seeing them play. But it just seems a bit like after the summer of weirdness, we've now got the winter of kind of random signings that just kind of come out of nowhere. Whereas like with St. Truden, it's like you never see them kind of making these signings at the moment, because there doesn't seem to be any sort of direction in terms of what's the point of bringing in players at the moment, because we have no idea what it's going to look like in the summer. We have no idea who's going to be the manager in the summer. And on the pitch, it just felt like this was always going to be a 1-1 draw between these two sides, evenly matched, fighting out for playoff 2. Didn't really want to give it away against either one wanted to give it away, against each other to kind of give up a space in playoff 2. So kind of looked like a fair result, and yeah, just kind of what you'd have predicted from these two, I guess.
Yeah, definitely a fair result. Hayashi's goal was fantastic, I thought. I thought that was a lovely move and a great finish. Good goal, that. Yeah, not much between the sides on the pitch, certainly. And I think it'll remain that way, you know, right up until, you know, we know who the playoff 2 sides are going to be, of which these 2 are going to be right in the mix with, along with Cercle probably fighting to get in there, and probably only one of those 3 sides will make it. Anderlecht might disagree. They might think they're still in with a shout. Although the way they've been performing recently, I think it's maybe going to be a bit of a stretch for them unless they can go on a late impressive run. Yeah, I mean, decent game this again. I thought there was decent quality on show from what I saw of it. Leuven, interesting to see them do what you're saying actually is genuinely interesting business there. It'll be interesting to see how those players adjust to European football. We know that Ariel Jacobs, who came in not that long ago, the new sporting director at Leuven, it'll be interesting to see whether he's the key mover and shaker behind that deal or whether these ones were already in place. It'll be interesting to see what they do over the summer actually as well. Same as it will with St Truden. Obviously, we know Bernd Hollerbach leaving. That club's going to look probably quite different come the start of next season. Obviously, there'll be a new coach. They're going to have to tinker with the squad. There's a number of players whose contract runs out as well, so they'll probably lose them. St Truden never do that much business. We know that they're quite quiet, and a lot of their transfer business historically is quite short term. It's worth highlighting that as well. There's a lot of, and I don't mean to sound negative when I say this, but sticking plaster type work that goes on with their transfer work, which has worked very positively for them in the past. So if it works for you, then that's absolutely fine. But it feels like that club is now at a point where they have a choice to make between, do we try and continue doing that under a new coach, which is obviously always very risky, or do we try and build something in the short or medium term that's a little bit more long lasting, which might mean developing some of their young players? So it'll be very interesting to see what they choose to do with that over the summer. They've obviously got plenty of time to work in that. That's the encouraging thing, and I'm sure they have a plan in place for that now. And also the other big question is what's going to happen with Gianni Bruno. I mean, obviously he'll go back to Ghent in the short term, but would they like to try and keep hold of him, because he's been pretty good since he's been there, and why wouldn't you want to, if you couldn't hold on to him? Having said that, there will be a lot of interest in him, because obviously I don't think he's going to get a sniff back at the Gemelco next season either, so I would expect him either to move on or to stay at St Truden. So he won't be short of offers, I don't think, will he, Ben?
No, absolutely not, and he shouldn't be. The way he's been playing this season, he should be, especially for those mid-table teams. I think we spoke about it last week, like the teams that should really be doing everything they can to get Gianni Bruno in.
Mechelen could do with a Gianni Bruno.
100%. Yeah, I feel like it's that sort of level of teams where he should be going.
Yeah.
If Ghent aren't going to use him, which they probably won't, because it just didn't work out. Let's go to the other game, which was just an absolute mental one. Kortrijk against Oostende. It was a massive game, obviously, for all the relegation reasons. And Oostende played pretty decently, I thought, in this one. And this result will frustrate the pants off of them and Dominic Thalhammer, because even from the beginning, they were the better side. David Atanga missed a sitter. He literally just had to head it anywhere but at Vandenberg, and he's headed it at Vandenberg. They had a couple of other chances that they really, really should have taken. They ended the game with like 22 shots, 7 of which were on target. So that kind of sums it up a little bit. But then they went behind. Attack kind of breaks down on the edge of their box, and Selemani's there just to smash it past Phillips into the net. And, after we kind of spoke about Phillips and his save percentage, I was like, okay, let's see what he could do. But there's nothing he could do about that goal. Like, it was just a great strike for Selemani. So it's 1-0 to Kortrijk, and that kind of gets them going. And now they're starting to play a little bit more. But for the first 20 minutes, Oostende were definitely the better team. And they got the goal they deserved just at the very end of the half. Nick Betzner once again coming up with the goods. Fraser Hornby straight back into the starting 11, no surprise there. He came up with the assist for that one. It was good to see Hornby back. You could tell he wasn't fully fit, but I think for Thalhammer and the club, it's kind of like, well, this is such an important game, we have to risk him. And he seems to me, Scott, like the sort of player that would be more than happy to get on the pitch. I feel like he's not one of the players that likes to sit around and watch. Interesting as well, speaking about, so Durdov comes on Selemani. He came out after the game and said, I'm going to stay until the end of the season and try and keep this team in the league. And which is great to hear if you're a Kortrijk fan. We were talking just judging by Scott about kind of that attitude that he's bringing to the club. And then he can move on again in the summer. It was great to hear that he was happy to do that. Into the second half we go. Almost scored a really nice goal actually, where he kind of fell on the floor, but still managed to flick it and get it past Vandenberg in the goal. But then it was cleared off the line. I think by Wazinski was back there at that point. But then it looked like Ostend were finally going to get a win. Thierry Ambrose with a really nice finish in the 84th minute. He's recently been linked with a move to Hull. I haven't seen anything more about that. It kind of went a little bit quiet. I did see some Hull fans being like, he's been a shining light for a relegation threatened side. I was like, you haven't watched them because he's definitely not been a shining light for a relegation threatened side. Let's be honest. I do find it funny when, people who don't watch the league then comment on the league in that sort of sense.
Yeah, don't do that, everybody. Don't take it from us. Word of advice: see if you haven't seen a player, you haven't seen an action. It's always much better, isn't it, Ben? To go, do you know what? I haven't seen enough, because otherwise, if you go on social media, you just look like a tit, don't you?
Yeah, 100%. I was watching that. I don't know if you've seen that Harry Redknapp, Frank Lampard one, where they're at like a West Ham kind of fans forum, and the guy's like, Frank Lampard will never achieve anything. You should have let Scotty Cannon have more game time or something. It's something along those lines. And if you look it up, Frank Lampard obviously went on to win Premier League titles, all that. I think Scotty Cannon went into non-league and became a mechanic. It shows that if you don't know, and if you're questioning people that do know. Anyway, I digress. It looks like Thierry Ambrose is going to stay. It was a really nice finish from him, and that you just want to see more of that from Thierry Ambrose, more goals, especially for this club. And you're like, come on, Eastend, you got to hold on now. You've played well. You've had probably one of your best performances over the last couple of weeks. And then another goal that Phillips has absolutely no chance defending. Avenatti with a terrible shot, and it just hits Gay and goes in. And it's just like, what can you do about that? And you could just see like the frustration, and it just, I can imagine in the dressing room they're just like that was there. We should have got the win in that game, because if they had it, it would have closed everything back up again, and they would have kind of leapfrogged Nauzultavagen and Eupen. Or no, they'd have been kind of level on points, I guess, with those two sides, instead of being 2 points behind them, and they'd been just a point behind, or 2 points behind Kortrijk. So I'm getting all my numbers mixed up. A massive missed opportunity for East End.
Yeah, that'd be a really sore one for them, because actually they played really well. And when I was having a look at this game, I thought, oh, they've won it. They deserve to win it. And there were the seconds of me saying that they hadn't won it. And sometimes when you're not getting much luck, you really don't get any luck. The good news for Koos Boys is, I think, based on that sort of performance, we can say they're alive. We've been a bit down on them in recent weeks and really concerned with them, but that's a performance level where if they can play like that most weeks, they are going to give themselves a chance. Fraser Hornby's a big plus. I know we keep highlighting this, but I don't think it's a coincidence that they've hit a performance level, this past weekend, that they've not managed to do for quite some time without him in the side. So he does definitely make a difference. I don't think he's completely fit yet, and it was obviously risky to bring him back in, but I can understand why, because this was a massive game that they actually had to get something out of. They'll be desperately disappointed not to have got all 3 points, which would have allowed them to kind of jump out of the bottom three. But the main thing from their point of view is if they can maintain that level of performance and output in games, then they will start to pick up some points. So some reasons to be optimistic for Koos Boys for a change, but decent performance from them. Lovely goal from Selemani, great finish. They'll be really encouraged by him staying till the summer, because we know he can score goals. So although they shouldn't relax about that too much, those sorts of things are the margins that make the difference at this level. So they will feel pretty good about that, I think.
Yeah, no, 100%. Just keeping quality players. That's all you can really ask for, isn't it, at the end of the day? They have just brought in Nicholas Deer from Midtjylland, Danish youth international, who can play kind of left back, left midfield. I guess that's with Christoph de Haan's kind of moving on, and kind of strengthens them a little bit on that side as well. They've done some interesting transfers. Martin Regali, Martin Wazinski, Cristiano Atamona as well. But they've definitely have improved. But I'd be a little bit concerned with that performance against East End, just based on the kind of the judgment that's a game they should have been up for a little bit more than they were to start with. And obviously there was that defeat to Mechelen. So it's kind of, while they have improved, they've definitely improved. They're definitely not out of it, because that's a loss to a team that they could really have done with a win against in Mechelen to drag them into it, and then a late draw, so a good draw in the sense of that, with a side in the relegation fight. Like, these are the games you really do need to win. Like, pick up the draws and that against everyone else, and then win these games against these kind of relegation teams, because that's what's going to make the difference at the end of the day. So yeah, I agree with you. I think for Oostend, it gives them a little bit of confidence, but there's a lot further to go, and that was one they really did need to win. Let's go to Charleroi Union, which I didn't watch, and I'm pretty glad I didn't watch, because it didn't look like a great game, to be honest. Did finish 1-0 to Union. That man, Gustav Nielsen, again, really, really nice goal in the 24th minute. Just instinctive strikers hit with his left foot. They have bought Jorby Vertessen, I think it was, from PSV in on loan, but he's going to have to get rid of Gustav Nielsen if he thinks he's going to get a starting place. It's just kind of one of those things. It looks like Dante Van Zoo is definitely going on to New York Red Bulls, or whatever. They're just called Red Bulls now, who knows. That looks like it's going to happen. Only €5 million, which seems like an absolute steal. For Charleroi, just one shot on target, but things maybe about to start to improve if you're a Charleroi fan, because Bayo is back. Great to see them picking back up. I mean, they've absolutely, I don't know how much they've got to pay or whatever, but it looks like they've completely fleeced Watford, because they sold him for, I think it was like €5 million or something like that, and I just bought him back on loan. Obviously, Bayat's involved. Like, all the Watford fans are saying, oh, yeah, Bayat going at it, blah, blah, blah. But it just seems like one of those good deals, getting back in. Literally identical time to last season when he went on that run. But yeah, Scott, we'll speak a little bit more about Vance's departure later. I want to kind of chuck that into a talk about Onuachu later. So we'll kind of park that for the moment. But we spoke about Nielsen, obviously he's great. But do you think Bayo back at Charleroi, like that's it now? They should be able to get away from that relegation zone and kind of scrap it out a little bit for playoff 2 potentially, but definitely sit nicely in mid-table and be safe.
Well, you would hope so, as will they, of course. You know, he's a player who obviously knows the club very well. It's not that long since he left. I suppose it's really just a question of how he fits into the system. You know, are they going to play the same way they did before Mazu came in? We all know what Bayo's strengths are, and obviously you're going to have to play to them to get the best out of him. And I mean, I think he scored something like 11 and 16 the second half of last season before he went to Watford. So if they can give him service and play to his strengths, then he should score enough goals for them to kind of pick up enough points and to ease all of their worries. I think it's a good solution in the short term, probably. The next 2 or 3 weeks will tell us whether they're going to be able to get the best out of him. Probably playing him as a lone striker, you know what I mean, as he was at the end of last season. It's an interesting one, actually. It's an interesting one. You know, Watford obviously have the advantage of allowing him to go there and stay fit and kind of get his confidence back a bit. And I always felt at the time when he left that was never going to be a great move for him for various reasons. And I felt that when they bought him, even though they paid a pretty decent fee for him, that he wasn't being bought, you know, with Watford having much confidence he was going to turn out to be their main man. You know, it's the English football mentality of, you know, just throw some money at it and, you know, we can afford to kind of take a loss in this a little bit. So it wouldn't surprise me either if he went back to Watford in the summer and ended up back in Belgium somewhere at some point. Again, another sort of striker that a club like Mechelen could use. You know what I mean? If you play him in the right system, he can be very, very effective. I've seen him in person a few times during his time at Celtic, and he's a player who kind of thrives on confidence as well. He can miss some real sitters, and that can affect his confidence. But when he gets going in a run, which he did at Charleroi, and he seemed quite happy there, so he probably should have stayed. We said that at the time, but you know, money talks, of course it does. So it's a really interesting one, that to see what sort of impact he has. Nielsen's goal, I thought Nielsen's goal was brilliant, almost the best goal of the weekend, but for me, just the second best goal. There was a brilliant goal in the Challenger Pro League this weekend, which we'll talk to when we get to, that I think is just a little bit better than this one, but really, really good goal. And as you were saying, I'm glad you highlighted it. I think Vertessen is going to struggle to get into the side the way that Nielsen's been playing recently. We spoke about him last week and kind of what a handful he can be, and he's really taking the opportunity he's been given with Van Zier kind of transitioning out of the side and almost certain to leave now, to kind of stake that spot as, you know, as a first choice striker alongside Boniface. And I think they're quite a good combination, actually. They seem to link up kind of quite well. He's got so many facets to his game, Nielsen. You know, he does have a bit of pace about him. He's good physically. He's extremely good in the air, as we've already seen, particularly if you leave him unmarked anywhere near the back post, which Ghent did recently, much to Hein van Heizenbroek's frustration. So, a bit of, healthy competition up front for Union, which can only help them. But this competition in the squad there, all across it for Union, has stood them good stead throughout the whole season. Players are responding really, really well to the competition on all fronts, and the competition from teammates as well. And that's pushing them on to a new level this season, I think.
Yeah, definitely, and they clearly are quite a tight knit bunch, because I think they said they've kind of celebrated that Dante Vanz's got a move that he wants. We can question that move. I don't think it's the right move for him to make, but from a footballing point of view, but maybe for other reasons, it is the move that he wants to make. And if he wants to do it, the club aren't going to get in his way. I think they've always been very clear about that when we spoke to Alex, in the sense of they're not stupid. Like, they know that you can't keep people unhappy and keep people in a place they don't want to be. It's like, it's kind of similar to what Brighton do. It's the same sort of thing. It's like, yeah, we have our valuation of these guys. If you meet that, we'll let them go. And this is kind of how we're going to do it. And then we'll just go get someone else from the lower leagues and we'll do the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think it's that kind of, I think someone was saying the other day, why are so many teams just buying these teams' players rather than being like, let's emulate the system that these guys are using for our own scouting and our own kind of data analysis and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, yeah, that's what you should be doing. If you're looking at a Brighton or a Union, Brentford, these sort of clubs, it's like, why aren't you emulating it? Why are you just trying to buy their players for premium prices when you could try and pick up those players for what they've done at a cheaper rate? So it's all very interesting, football recruitment. I think it always comes around this type of year as well. You talk about bio as well. Like, I agree. I can't remember what we said at the time, but I never felt like, yeah, that's going to work, because I've seen Watford and other teams, I guess, looking at kind of like Bournemouth, Sheffield United, where they're fighting to go up. They need to bring in some strikers, but it just doesn't really work. So I'm not sure about Lara Foster. I just don't know if that's going to work for the Premier League. Say with teams like Bournemouth, I'm trying to think of some of the strikers they've had where it's been kind of like, yeah, they're good. They'll be good in the Championship maybe, but like long term, do they actually fit what you're trying to do? So very interesting kind of times ahead for both of those sides of different factors. Obviously, Bayer coming back to Charlotte, I think it's just they needed someone, and why not go get the man that you missed out, that left you, basically. One side that's desperate to sign a striker is Anderlecht. Oh my word, they are desperate to sign a striker, and as of now, they still have not signed a striker. I think it's the Movecast guys on Twitter have just been like counting down the hours, and they're like, "What is Fredberg doing? Like, not what is he doing? They're like, why is he making us wait? Like, something's got to happen."
Yeah, I think I don't know about you, Ben, but I'm almost certain that Jesper's phone will probably be the hottest sporting directors in Belgium this
100%.
evening. I think,
because he knows that they need to do something. But then I'm also like, I don't know, I get kind of the vibe from him that he's not just going to be like panicking, because they could have panic bought someone by now, you'd think, because they just could have. Like, there were options out that they probably could have gone for, but I feel like they do kind of have a little bit more of an idea of what they want. But on the pitch against Antwerp, despite not like a ton of chances in this game, it was a really good kind of like end-to-end feisty game between two sides. Obviously, the feistiness went a little bit too far when Calvin Stengs, I think was it DOR, just punched in the back of the head for no reason. Absolutely no reason. It's just bizarre. Like, obvious red card. Rahman then gets his second yellow card like 14 minutes later, and everyone was like, I think it was Reed, wasn't it? He was like, I think he forgot he had a yellow card, which is just like, oh, what are you doing? You're like, this is finally your chance to kind of claim a stake in the side. You're the only really recognised striker that they've got. Perfect chance for Rahman. And obviously without Janssen with his suspension. So Garner Kirk, who they brought in using that kind of FIFA exemption rule for players that are playing in Russia, they've brought him in until the end of the season, which seems like a decent pickup. Obviously Mikkel Frey out on loan at Schalke as well. They needed some kind of backup, and Kirk just gives them a different dimension to what they kind of have already, or what they did have, because Frey and Janssen were kind of similar in terms of their big men. Whereas Kirk, it's like, it gives Van Bommel a little bit of chance to kind of change the game up a little bit. But yeah, I don't really know what else to really say about this game, because there weren't tons and tons of highlights. It was actually a really interesting and good game to watch. It's just a shame that it finished 0-0 and that the two red cards kind of overshadowed what was good performances from the likes of Vermeer, and Vertonghen played quite well. I thought Sardella put in a good shift as well, actually, at left back, considering he's not always been rated. So yeah, a good game, but 0-0 probably not what either side wanted.
Yeah, I don't think I can add too much to that analysis, actually, Ben, other than to say if Calvin Steng's jabs are anything anything to go by. He's got a good second career as a boxer if he ever wants it. That was wild. It just kind of came out of nowhere. The provocation just didn't seem to be there, actually, bizarrely.
Let's go to one of the games of the weekend. For once, I was actually quite lucky. I watched the Kortrijk and Oostende one, and then I watched this Cercle Brugge Ghent one, and this one was just fantastic. Absolutely loved it. Good atmosphere in the Jan Breidel. Good competitive game between these two. Getting a lot of possession, but that didn't matter. 58 minutes in, Ayasu Ueda with a really easy header to stick it in the back of the net. Paul Nardi came in for so much criticism from Heisenberg after the game. If I read it correctly, I think he said it was Proximus League level goalkeeping or something like that, which was just a bit brutal. I was like, well, yeah, way to stick a man down. But yeah, Ueda got the first in the 58th, and literally a minute later, it was 2-0. Kevin Denke, just poor play out from the back from Ghent. Cercle Brugge took advantage of that. Ball finds Kevin Denke. He absolutely lashes it in to make it 2-0 to Cercle. The game's not done there. Ghent coming back into it. I think, who was it that had a really nice shot on goal? Maybe it was Kuipers. Kuipers with like a really nice touch in the box. He fires it. I can't remember if Allison got a hand to it. He may have got a hand to it, tipping it onto the bar. But then Julian Dessart was there to tap it in. There was actually nothing the goalkeeper could do to make it 2-1. And then in the 90th minute, it looked like Ghent had snatched a draw. Fofana with a really, really good cross on the right-hand side. That man, Darko Lamajic, with a just ridiculously good header, just loops it over Miyake into the far corner. At that point, you're thinking, Cercle have thrown away a really good chance to get a win. But that man, Jesper Darland, now stepping up to the plate. I mean, of all the people, you did not expect to see him charging forward with the ball in the 94th minute, smashing it in from the edge of the box to make it 3-2 to Cercle Brugge. Saw someone be like, his name rhymes with Haaland. He's got the same stature as Haaland. Like, he's just the defensive version of Haaland. Not sure we're quite there yet, but really, really good finish from Jesper. Obviously, they're going to keep him till the end of the season, despite the interest from Monaco. Does it look like Dino Hotic is going to be off to, I think it's Turkey. It looks like he might be off to. We'll see what happens with that one. But he's not even starting for them at the moment. And they're still playing well with Sommers and Ueda just in behind Denke. But it's got a really, really good game. Crazy, crazy finish. Jesper Darland, the hero of all people. It looks like... I kind of was worried because we saw it last year with Cercle when they went on that. They changed manager. Thalhammer came in, went on a really good run. It stopped and it was actually quite bad. And it looked like it was about to happen again. But that's 3 on the bounce without defeat, 2 wins in a row. It looks like, and maybe that's what Carlos was thinking about, that adaptability, that ability to change things. He's dropped Hotic, he's brought in some other players, and it's working. And they got a really, really big win against a very, very good team.
Definitely game of the weekend, this. Really good. I thought Cercle were great, actually. Lamajic, what an amazing header, you're right. I mean, got to go and watch that a few times. Big Van Heisenberg's reaction to that header goal from Lamajic was interesting because, we know he likes to kind of gesticulate and is never shy at telling you what he thinks about everything while on the touchline. I've never seen him kind of celebrate in such a positive way a goal like he did there. He enjoyed that. I think that had more to do with, who the goal came from rather than anything else, particularly at that point in the game when they thought they'd nicked something, which wasn't to be the case. This game actually had one of my moments of the weekend. Just immediately after Dallin's winner, everybody's going crazy, as always happens with winners like that. Dallin's loving it. With the Cercle Ultras, and there's actually most of you have probably seen this, it's great, there's a ball girl standing right in front of Dalland while he's celebrating with Cercle fans, and she shakes her head and she sends Dalland this really, really dirty look that made me think, whoa, you're definitely not a Cercle fan, that's for sure. So I did wonder whether she's a club fan or whatever, but she was not impressed by Dalland's goal or his celebrations. Lovely moment that. Yeah, Cercle, they'll be glad to get back on track after a couple of results that went against them, and they've performed pretty well against Big Hein's side this season. I think they enjoy playing against them. You can tell that their performances against them have been particularly good. So there's something about the Buffaloes that bring out the best in Cercle. Cercle, we've had lots positive to say about them. We should probably be more positive again. Obviously, the youngest side in the league, managing to keep that kind of squad together. CK's come in now and is getting fitter will definitely make a difference, because he has quality, and that confidence will rub off on the rest of the squad. I'm glad you mentioned Hottage, actually, because they have made him a contract offer, which hasn't been agreed or signed yet. So, that was quite some time ago, I think. So it'll be interesting to see what he chooses to do over the summer. And I do wonder whether the lack of starting places is more about just putting a little bit of pressure on him to kind of make a decision so that everybody knows where they are. But they haven't suffered too much from him not playing as much as he would normally recently, which from Miro Muslic's point of view is a tremendous positive, because he's a really good creative player, Hottage, as we know, and an important player for them generally. So there are signs that should he move on in the summer, depending on offers, that they might not miss him as much as they and we would imagine. So that's quite an interesting one, and has surprised me a little bit. The fact he's been very quiet about everything tells me that perhaps he will be moving on in the summer. It's much like the situation we've seen with some other big players, particularly a couple of big faces at Standard, who are now former Standard players, of course. But yeah, really good game this, and these two enjoy playing each other. There's been a lot of goals in the matches between the sides, these two this season.
Yeah, it should be one of the Mola games every time now, because it is always a classic in terms of goals scored and stuff like that. Yeah, and I trust the scouting department at Cercle. They've probably already got like a list of names to replace Hotic in terms of creativity, in terms of the profile of player they're looking for. So, or maybe they've got them within the squad already that they think can just kind of slot in and do the job. I think, yeah, Sommers and Demand they're just a slight like Swiss Army knife type of players that like they just seem to be able to be molded into kind of anywhere you want them to play. Do you know what I mean? Especially Sommers, I feel like he'll just go and he feels like one of those, like, if he was English, they'd be like, oh, he's just like an honest footballer. He'll just do his job and like get on with it, blah, blah, blah. I feel like, yeah, he is one of those players that just kind of like will adapt to the situation and kind of just, he'll play 100% wherever you put him on the pitch. So he'd play centre back if he had to, and probably put in a shift there as well. So yeah, I think they've got some good characters around. For Ghent, that's a frustrating one to take, because they literally just kind of clawed themselves above Club Brugge into the playoff one spot. But Club Brugge won a game. Finally. They finally won a game. Not convincingly, to say the least, but they did beat Zulte Waregem 2-1. Noah Lang with the opening goal. Took a while for this one to be given. Originally, I think it was given as offside. Jukkler with like a cross shot that was pretty bad. Van Aken trying to convert it, I'd safe to say, but kind of not converting it. But Lang was there to tap it in within the 7th minute. And at that point, this is what I think Scott Parker's been talking about. Like, and I think especially in terms of once they've got that first goal, go on and push on, get some more goals. Especially, yes, Zulte Waregem have been better, but they've not got Ruud Vormer because he's not eligible to play in this one. And they are in the bottom 3. You're the defending champions. Go on and play. And I think that's what he wants to see. He didn't see that, so obviously he moaned about not seeing that after the game, as he has done every single week, because Zulte Waregem just came straight back at them. They were not willing to lie down, and it was some of the worst defending I've seen from a Club Brugge side this season that let Endor back in to score the equaliser. Onyedika didn't want it. Odoi and Mata didn't really want it. Endor did want it, and he just went straight through them, picked the ball up and tapped it in. Lovely finish from him, actually, and he had an absolute sitter a couple of minutes later, which could have made it 2-1 to Zulte Waregem, but he just, classic kind of cliche, I know, but he snatched at it, and he did snatch at it, and he kind of put it wide, and he got punished for that just before half-time. Hans Van Aken on the volley in the 6-yard box. He's not going to miss from there. Really nice finish from him to make it 2-1 to Club going into the second half. But yeah, it was interesting. Like, we've spoken about this before, when Mbaile was like, I'm not going to sign Ruud Vormer because we don't have enough possession for him to enjoy that style of play. They had 55% possession against Club Brugge. I don't think that was ever going to be an issue. Like, they really did get on the ball and play in this one without Ruud in there. However, their kind of chances of really getting back into the game were scuppered when Borja Menendez, got himself sent off in the 85th minute. Just a pretty stupid tackle to kind of, I think it was Lang he took out at the end, and it was always going to be a red card. It was a bit silly. Or was it Scott Olsen? I can't remember. It was one of the two, either Lang or Scott Olsen. If it was Scott Olsen, it means it's the second red card he's won off someone in the space of a week. Slight concern, Jukkler did get off injured. Doesn't look like he's going to be available for the Antwerp game, so it looks like another Roman Yaremchuk potential appearance in that one. But finished 2-1 to Club Brugge. They do finally get the win, but it felt like their least impressive performance in a way. I thought they were better especially second half actually against Charleroi. They felt a little better than they were in this one. So for Zolta again, it's a big confidence booster to be like, look, we can go head to head with them. And I don't know if you saw after the game, they were asking Bailey about what positions he wants improvement in. And he was like, goalkeeper, defender, midfielder, or striker. Jokingly, he's like, but if I had 16 million, I could probably buy 16 players. So I think everyone's like, that's a massive. It's like him taking a big dig at Yaremchuk and Club Brugge or something like that. They have brought in, I think they brought in Karl Fila, the Polish kind of fullback
Mhm.
from Strasbourg, for me of Lechia Gdansk. He's come in, but I think he probably wants a centre back. But yeah, a little bit of a dig at Yaremchuk from a Bailey, which was just like a bit weird. But it seems like he's in a better mood. But for Scott Parker, at least it's you've got the win. Like it's kind of like, right, we've got over the hump. Now can we start to actually play like a team that is defending champions?
Yeah, I think in truth there wasn't very much between the sides actually in this game. I mean, Club managed to get this over the line because of some good old-fashioned static Zilta defending. I thought the defending on Van Aken's goal was particularly poor and was just a really cheap goal. And if I was, Mbaile, I mean, they're the sorts of goals that infuriate coaches. You know what I mean? With defenders just ball watching and just stopping dead. Not doing the basics. And I think that was the difference for me in this game. Zilta again were decent and managed to maintain the performance level they've set over the last 3 or 4 weeks, even without Vormer playing. So that effect he's had on the dynamic of the squad appears to have been maintained for them, even though he wasn't on the pitch, which is tremendously encouraging from a Zilta's perspective. They're obviously feeling a bit better about themselves. I don't think many people probably expected Zilta to really get anything out of this game. Club were obviously big favourites just because of who they are going into this game, but it's funny how some a little improvement in form can make a big difference to your mentality going into a game like this. Curiously enough, I think Zilta have actually played a lot of their best football over the last couple of years against Club. There was a game I remember where I think they kind of played Club off the park when they went to the Jan Bridal and didn't manage to get anything out of that, which was extraordinary as well. So they're a club that they enjoy playing against, that they play quite good football against in the matches that I've seen anyway. Yeah, Scotty Parker will just be delighted to have kind of got that first one notched up. Obviously, that's big for them psychologically. They've got a new psychologist working with them who I think has a relationship with Scotty Parker in the past as well. So I'm sure he's tasked him with, sorting out, exactly what you were talking about basically, seizing the initiative because of who they are. And obviously the big game against Benfica is not too far away now. So, getting that first win is important for all sorts of reasons. But yeah, Zilta shouldn't be too down on themselves on that one. They just need to kind of, keep an eye on that static defending. They've conceded a couple recently that were much more in line with the sort of defending we've seen over them over the last couple of years. And Big Hein, be the one that probably was the sorest one watching this one, seeing that playoff one spot slip with them dropping points and Scotty Parker's club managing to leapfrog them once again.
Yeah, absolutely. And we probably got to mention as well, talking about Yaremchuk, he was also taken off after coming on for Eucla, replaced with Kamal So, I think it was. With everyone obviously being like, it's because he was rubbish. Scott Parker coming out being like, no, it's for tactical reasons. I've got to respond to what the other team is doing, be proactive.
It'll be really interesting to see if anything happens at the Jan Bridal from Club Brugge's perspective before the window closes later tonight, because they are still looking for another striker. Obviously, Eucla's injured now and might miss the next couple of games. Yaremchuk obviously has been pretty poor since he came back to Belgium for various reasons. We know he's a good player and can do it. He's just clearly not happy for whatever reason. Things aren't working there. So I can understand why they're quite keen to try and bring somebody in just as an alternative option, because yeah, you could be quite light up top, if Eucla's not able to be fit kind of quickly and Yaremchuk isn't performing. So I can understand that. So it'll be interesting.
Scott Parker was kind of like, I don't want anyone new coming in. I just want to work with what I've got. But then, yeah, I think we spoke about this before, didn't we? It's like, well, depends what the hierarchy's ambitions are. If they want to win the league, they should probably go and get someone else in. They've done a bit of a clear. Eder Balanta has gone to Schalke. So they are slowly getting rid of some players. And they got the financials to be able to bring players in. It's just maybe they've not found the right profile of striker that they do want to bring in to put pressure on Eucla and Yaremchuk. But yeah, we'll see what happens there. One side who look like they're about to lose their star striker, Genk, but they did manage to absolutely dismantle Solang. Big Paul with a penalty in the 7th minute after Mvue fouled Henan. Big Paul stepped up and put it away. Tressel then did get a goal, really nice assist from El Canous with a back flick into him. One of those ones where like it seems like it was quite far out for the pass to count as an assist. But because it's a back flick and it looked really pretty, it deserves to be an assist. Big Paul then got his second in the 60th minute. Really easy finish from him. And then Pencil got one in the 64th to pretty much wrap this one up. Genk had kind of said they'd spoken before the game about not taking Serang lightly, and the scoreline definitely reflected that they didn't. Serang have just announced, I think it's Sergio Conceição has left to go back to Portugal. I saw rumours that Mustafa Mbao is going to go back to France as well and join Met's second team. They've done literally nothing, I don't think, in this transfer window apart from release players and like let players go.
Are you saying they've resigned to their fate?
I think they very much are, which I don't think is actually the worst possible approach, if you know what I mean, because I just don't see any point in them spending money that they just don't have. It's just not like a good idea because it's just not sustainable. But we could, I guess the conversation we're going to have now about Genk is slightly different considering that Paul Onuachu is going to Southampton. Everyone's saying it's happening. It probably have happened by the time we release this, but it should have happened. Otherwise, they've missed the deadline. He gets his Premier League move. Whether it's the right Premier League move, I'm just not so sure. I was saying this to a couple of friends actually the other day. I'm like, I always find it quite funny when players are like, I want to go and play in the Premier League, and then they join a team in the bottom three, play in the Premier League for 4 months and then end up in the Championship. I'm like, was it really worth it? Like, pay-wise, it probably was, but like, you're going there, and I don't think the fit is right. He needs a team that's going to create a lot of chances or create for him. And I don't know if Southampton are that team. Whereas maybe a team like Brighton that create a lot of chances, he could have been quite useful at, because we've seen with Genk, especially this season and in previous seasons, when you've got the creative players behind him, he's an absolute beast. Like, you've had Canous obviously hasn't got the assist numbers, but he's been the link player that gives it off to Paintsel and Tressel, who then create for him. So I'm surprised Southampton aren't being like, can we take Mike Tressel as well, because we want to have the two of them together. But Scott, I think the conversation I wanted to have with you is, Paul Onuachu obviously got going. Very unlikely that Genk are going to be able to get someone in such short notice, especially to replace his goal. So you're looking at Samatta as the starting striker. Nemet's obviously gone as well. So we're looking at Samatta and Urasaw potentially as the striker there. And then at Union, obviously Dante Van Zier's gone, who, if I'm believe correctly, he is their top scorer as well. So we've got a situation now where the top two teams in the league have lost their top scorers. Does that completely change the title race? Because in my mind, it completely changes the outlook of the season if everything stays the same as what it is now. Union maybe a little bit, yes, because they bought in Jorbi Vertessen, and Dante's, like, his finishing was a little bit erratic, so maybe the others will step up and score a couple of those goals, but he's still an important cog in the machine of how they play, and he could be relied on at times to get the goals and do the pressing that they want him to do. Whereas the same with Genk, it's not necessarily, they'll still create and they'll still score some goals, but Onuachu was so good, and Samatta's not as good, especially not anymore. He's not the same player he was when he was at Genk before. It just feels like the title race has completely changed just in the space of a couple of hours, which is why, kind of alluding to what you're talking about earlier with Club Brugge bringing someone in, like, it's definitely not over now in that sense. Like, don't punt on it. And Antwerp are probably looking at this thinking they lost Mikkel Frey, but in a way, this is the best deadline day they could possibly have had in terms of looking at these other teams losing players.
Yeah, I think that's a really good analysis of the situation, Ben, because you look at the Genk squad minus Paul Onuachu and you think, okay, who's potentially, obviously Samatta is kind of the obvious, not necessarily the answer, but the obvious striker to fulfill those shoes kind of in the short term, but there are question marks over whether he can kind of develop a run of form that's anything like that. I think from Wouter Rankin's point of view, I think he's probably looking at this, and I did see him earlier on today, in fact, before the agreement was reached reached between Genk and Southampton. He did say, look, he's here, he's trained today, we don't want to lose him, we have a title to win, but I'm not naive enough to think that, things can't change very, very quickly, which they appear to have done. So I think he knows that, should that deal go through, that it's going to ask some questions of the Genkies. But Wouter Rankin's a coach who's been very good at getting the best out of a lot of his attacking players. So the way I look at this is, yes, I think things have completely changed because there's no obvious main striker there who would worry you as an opposition playing Genk at the moment. But out wide, they've got players who can still hurt you. Kind of Pansel and Trezor can score goals, I think, and I suspect they'll be the sorts of conversation that kind of happen now. Look, we want more of you to pitch him as goals, kind of where is possible to support Ali Samata in the short term, because none of us have seen anything to suggest he can go in the sort of scoring run anything like Onuachu's. That's not to say that he won't, but yeah, it does change things. And from Union's perspective, there, as we were saying earlier, there's depth and quality in that squad and goals that come from kind of all over the place, much like there is for Genk. But I think Union have been a little bit less reliant on a single striker, unlike Genk. I mean, Onuachu, 16 and 19, which looks like that's going to be his last kind of tally for the season. So yeah, I think it does change the complexion of how things look, and that concertina effect of sides dropping points and things just getting a little bit tighter as we get nearer the playoffs, which are still a couple of months away yet, looks like it probably will happen now. And yeah, you mentioning Antwerp, as we wanted to highlight last week, them being very much still in this, that's absolutely the case. They will look at that and think, okay, this is interesting. It's funny psychologically, as you were saying, how such an important player leaving can just kind of give other sides a whole boost, especially when obviously they're going to be playing each other again. So yeah, I wouldn't read anything at all at the moment into the points difference between these sides with a change like that, particularly with how well he's been playing. Obviously, he gets a couple of goals this weekend as well. Genk kind of steamrolling Serang in this game, Serang offering very, very little in truth. But yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting to see what kind of happens next. I honestly don't think it'll derail Genk too much. I think they've been playing too well and have too many offensive outlets for this to derail them in a way that will be massively problematic for them. But it'll be interesting just to see how they handle it kind of psychologically, and whether Samata in particular can seize this opportunity. Now, obviously, Luca Oyen's still to come back into the frame, but probably won't be able to play until maybe early March at the earliest, which is a wee bit away yet. So there's some encouragement there for Genk. But Wouter Rankin, above all, is a coach who doesn't let challenges kind of get him down. Losing Ito and Bongonda wasn't seen as a negative for him. And I suspect he'll be looking at this the same way, going, look, okay, it's not ideal, I wouldn't choose this, but, we need to adapt to this and rise to the challenge and tackle it in the positive way that he's done with situations like this in the past. So, yeah, interesting times ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if it's good for yours or bad for yours to not be here, because it could have been a nice little therapy session just to kind of get all the frustration out, because this, I think, was, from what he was saying, kind of the worst nightmare was like, if he's going to go, at least make it happen before the deadline day. And what is it about? Yeah. I don't understand it. What is it about? Like, it seems like us English as a country, the only teams that have this like deadline day panic. Like, everyone else just kind of gets on with it and gets it done. Like the Germans, they're already done as the time of we're recording. They've finished their deadline day, haven't they? They're done. But we're like, we're gonna leave it to the last minute. It's like, you knew you wanted Onuachu. Like, you've had a bid rejected. Why don't you just come in and, it was like, just come in and get him then? Like, you've had the time. Like,
absolutely, no, it's worth having another. Yeah, totally, you're right. You raise a really important point there, because it's infuriating as a fan of a side like Genk in a situation like this, where you lose somebody so important who's been so good for you over the last two or three seasons, and English Premier League money comes in throwing silly money around as they're doing all the time, destabilising sides who are pushing hard for a league title, knowing fine well that they don't have time for an adequate replacement at all. And as for me and you as neutrals in a Belgian sense, I mean, this is just, it annoyed me when I saw that today, because I thought, the arrogance of being able to write those blank checks is just pretty ridiculous. I mean, Southampton don't care; they're just doing their business, and this is where obviously football becomes quite unpleasant, and it just becomes about that numbers game. They throw money, and from Genk's point of view, it's a good bit of business. It's very hard to say no to an offer like that, which they could have done, because of the circumstances they were in. But it's weighing up the risk of a player kind of downing tools and going in the huff and derailing the rest of the squad as well, which ultimately probably isn't worth it. But it's really difficult to take, I think. And I think fans of Premier League clubs in England and Premier League clubs, take these things for granted. But I can guarantee you they would feel exactly the same way as Genk fans do tonight, if that wasn't such a cash-rich league, because they'd be in exactly the same situation. And I'm old enough to remember a time pre-Premier League and pre these obscene amounts of money when English clubs were on a much more level footing with smaller countries. So yeah, changed times, unfortunately.
Yeah, it kind of does, doesn't it? Just kind of moves around like that. You've had it where the Italian teams are in the ascendancy and they're doing it. The Spanish teams are in the ascendancy and they're doing it. Now it's just the English teams in the ascendancy and they're doing it. But I'm more gutted because I just know that if Reading stay in the league next year, we're going to have flipping Paul Onuachu coming to the Medeski and just destroying us over 90 minutes. So that's kind of my biggest regret of this transfer. More so like, I don't know, yeah. I just don't know if it's going to work out for him. The thing is, I kind of respect what Genk always said to him, like, we will let you go if a good offer comes in and meets our valuation. He's always said, I want to play in the Premier League. So, like, nothing wrong with that. It is just the timing of it is so frustrating. Whereas with the Dante Van Zier one, like, Union knew, they went and got Job Vitesse. Like, they just did that. Yeah. Antwerp, like, Mikkel Frey's gone. Okay, we'll go get Gianna Kirk. Like, they've had the time to do that. Just Genk haven't had the time, which is really frustrating. Before we move on to the Challenger Pro League, we will mention that we have noticed that Domenico Tedesco is the new head coach of Belgium. He has taken over from Roberto Martinez. We're not going to talk about it today. We're going to kind of do a little bit more of a deep dive like we usually do on new managers. Scott's obviously the one that's volunteering to do that, but he's already agreed to it, so that's fine. Scott's going to go away, do a deep dive into Domenico Tedesco, obviously formerly of Cercle Brugge. I think he started at our good time in charge of Schalke for a bit, then it went quite badly. Did pretty well at Spartak Moscow. Leipzig obviously won the cup with RB Leipzig last season, but then got sacked this year. So an interesting appointment, but we'll speak a lot more about that next week. Scott, before we head off, let's quickly have a look at the Challenger, because you did mention earlier about a goal of the week contender.
Yeah, well, I was saying earlier that I thought Gustav Nielsen's goal, as brilliant as it was, and it was a brilliant goal. It was probably the best goal in the Pro League, but I think the best goal of the weekend actually was in the Challenger Pro League. Young Genk's first goal in their game against Beerschot was an absolutely wonderful team goal. We shared it on our Twitter, so if you scroll back in our timeline a little bit to the beginning of last weekend, you'll find the footage of that there. Really, really lovely goal that, interestingly, a certain Anur Etel Haj was part of. He didn't score the goal, but he was part of that rather silky move on a couple of occasions, and it's well worth seeking out. That for me was definitely the best goal of the weekend. In terms of the results, Beerschot got a rather dramatic last-minute winner against Young Genk to turn that game around and win 3-2. Quite a game that, actually. Not least because of that brilliant goal. Denza won 2-1 at home against Club Next, and it looks like Denza are just going to miss out on a playoff 1 spot now. I think it's going to be a bit difficult for them. We told you to keep an eye out on that, but I think they are just going to miss out, so we'll see. Other results, Virton lost 3-1 at home to Anderlecht Futures. Lommel drew 1-1 with Dender. Liège lost 2-1 at home to Molenbeek, who've now gone top. They're top this weekend, despite some of the internal tensions at the club. Things are going okay at the moment for them on the pitch anyway. And Beveren managed to rescue quite a dramatic late point against SL 16. We're 2 weeks away from the playoffs now in the Challenger Pro League. So things are about to kind of get quite exciting there. So do keep an eye on it, everybody. And there was a rather bizarre news this week about a fixture coming up this weekend. Young Genk are due to play Beveren, with Young Genk being the home side, but because of the pitch issues at the Sigika, Young Genk have been kind of rendered temporarily homeless and forced to find an alternative. They've not been able to find one, and we're in the ludicrous situation where Beveren's chief executive, Antoine Gobin, fan of the podcast, got in touch with us recently just to explain the context of this, and said that Beveren had decided to offer the Pro League the opportunity for this coming weekend's game to be played behind closed doors at the Free Teal, which is of course Beveren's home stadium, rather than wherever Young Genk would have tried to play this, because they felt that it was better to play on a grass surface, because it was looking like the alternative was the synthetic pitch at Wies, which of course is the pitch that Beveren's Daniel Moderner tore his ACL on, and Beveren were rather desperate not to play in a synthetic pitch, understandably. Nobody really likes them. So thanks for Antoine getting in touch with us and just providing some of the context on that kind of ahead of things. But yeah, keep an eye on the Challenger Pro League, everybody, because we're 2 weeks away from the playoffs, and we'll know a lot more about the sides that probably are going to be competing for that only one automatic promotion spot. It's looking like it's going to be a pretty close run race now between Beveren, Molenbeek and Beerschot for the title and ultimately promotion.
Yeah, and all three sides have been pretty active in the transfer window as well, bringing players in. One thing I did find funny about that kind of the Young Genk Beveren kind of game was the idea of like Young Genk just looking around to find a random field where they could just go play, like turning up like some Sunday league game, just on like a, that you get one of those, like there's like 5 or 6 different pitches, and all these like professional players turning up to play there, while all these other Sunday league games are going on, all the fans having to stand on the touchline around the pitch. Could have been quite a funny one, but I completely understand what Anton's coming with. I think if you can avoid it, definitely avoid the synthetic stuff, especially if like a player's had an injury from that earlier in the season. Like psychologically, it's probably better to, and if it's behind closed doors, it's kind of saying that we won't have our fans there as well. So it's kind of, it seems like a good alternative. Unless I can find a different one.
You're right. I think it's definitely the best alternative all round. I know Beveren fans are not too happy about it, because they're like, well, that's an extra game in our pitch that wouldn't be happening, so we don't want our pitch being knackered in the way that Genks has obviously been compromised. It's kind of bizarre, actually, because, for those who don't know a wee bit about this, there is a kind of rule that says, and it generally applies to Pro League sides rather than Challenger Pro League sides, but I think the Pro League have insisted on this rule being applied still, and that's around, if an alternative has to be found for whatever reason, it has to happen within a certain radius of that club, which meant that Genk were actually kind of, their hands were tied. They were kind of very limited as to where they could have gone to play this. So it was a very difficult one, and Beveren's offer, being generous, although it's not ideal, I think probably is actually the safest, certainly from a player's point of view, which is the main thing.
And it's going to be available on the day, so there's no issues with that, because obviously they wouldn't have been using it because they're away. So it just makes sense. As we keep saying, we are very much looking forward to seeing how the playoffs pan out. That probably does it for this evening. So we've probably got to go off and see if any transfers do happen. Then let Joris know that he needs to edit anything out that we've said about players that have moved or haven't moved or anything like that. So yeah, we'll see what happens there. Like I said, next week we'll talk a little bit more about Tedesco. Even if Joris can't join us, we'll get his kind of Belgian perspective on it as opposed to our neutral one, and we'll bring that to you as well. But Scott, as always, thank you very much for joining me this week.
What a delight. It's always a delight to sit down and have a chat about what's happening in Belgian football. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you very soon.
Absolutely. It definitely is always a pleasure. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, please do leave us a review on your podcast app of choice. You can also get in touch with us to ask us any questions, mainly on our Twitter site. That's the best way to do it. But once again, thank you very much for listening to this episode, and we'll see you very soon on another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast.